If you were born anytime before September 8th, 2018, you may have heard about a new Spider-Man game that hit the streets, one that really makes you
feel like Spiderman.
No, but despite the game reviewer cliché, the game really does capture the essence of what a Spider-Man game should feel like. The web slinging is quick and smooth and exhilarating. The story has you trying to tackle multiple supervillains' shenanigans as well as keeping up your normal life and navigating tricky social relationships. And at any point throughout the game, you can drop down out of the sky onto a looting or a car chase, web up all the bad guys, and then just leave their unconscious bodies in the middle of the street for someone else to deal with as you zip away into the sunset. It's perfect. It feels like the primary directive behind every aspect of the game was to put the player into Spider-Man's head, and the music is no exception, seamlessly setting the tone between grandstanding heroics, harrowing clashes with villains, and mundane city cleanup. So just how does the music here make you
feel like Spider-Man?
Simply put, it's cliched. No, I shouldn't say that. The music isn't really cliched. Cliched implies a lack of effort or thoughtfulness in the creation of the soundtrack, and that definitely isn't the case here. What I mean is that the Spider-Man soundtrack uses musical cliches from past superhero music to quickly inform the audience what the emotional tone of the game is going to be. If a musical cliche is an established idea or technique that's been used to the point of oversaturation, that means two things about this idea or technique. One, it'll be generic, boring, and or unmemorable, and two, it can immediately connect with an audience and inform them of the music's emotional content based on every other time that they've heard this musical idea used in the past. If you can balance the use of cliches in a way to minimize the former qualities and maximize the latter, you're going to have a very effective, broadly appealing soundtrack. Luckily for us, Spider-Man strikes this balance right, offering a soundtrack that pulls from a ton of established superhero-themed tropes without wading into boredom or predictability. Let's take a look through superhero movie history and see what musical ideas and cliches Spider-Man pulls from to give its soundtrack an authentic superhero sound. The first true blockbuster superhero movie came in 1978 with the release of Superman, scored by the great John Williams. There are several elements here that would be carried on through the music of following superhero features. The strong brass melody featuring leaps of fourths and fifths, the emphasis on the tonic chord, and the triplet feel 12/8 time signature, just to name a few. 1989's Batman introduced the idea of a darker, grittier superhero movie, and Danny Elfman's score followed suit, introducing the main theme with a French horn section playing gloomily over our tonic B minor chord. This solemn mood quickly erupts into a driving chromatic frenzy typical of Elfman's writing, but almost 20 years later we see the return of this kind of atmosphere in the soundtrack to 2005's Batman Begins. This score is heavy on atmosphere, with this horn melody, or rather single interval, fading in and out among another superhero music cliche to be, the driving string ostinato over the minor tonic drone. These strings outlining the third and root of our tonic D minor chord give the impression of a train chugging away in the background while the French horn soars into the foreground. Note the use of a minor third interval as the main melodic figure that gives a much darker, more personal contrast to Superman's adventurous fourth and fifth leaps. We also see another technique here that seems inescapable throughout superhero music today, with the use of the major 4 chord in a minor key. Check out this A minor F-D progression. The use of contrasting modes, with the F chord making use of the natural A minor scale while the D major chord borrows from the A Dorian scale, creates a sense that the music is getting brighter over the course of the progression. We're still in a minor key, but it feels like there's hope on the horizon. Moving Moving on to the current era of superhero movies, dominated of course by the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we see a lot of the music try to strike a balance between the somber tone of the Dark Knight films and the optimism of the original Superman theme. Take the track Cap's Promise from Captain America Civil War. We see the driving strings pounding away on a minor tonic chord a la Batman Begins, but the French horn melody, with its focus on 4th and 5th interval leaps, as well as the use of the major 4 chord, evokes a brighter tone than what was typical of the Batman Begins score. We see once again this 1 flat 6 major 4 chord progression used in Danny Elfman's main theme for Avengers Age of Ultron. We also see the return of the compound time triplet rhythms that we saw in Williams' original Superman score and the 2-note driving string part that we saw in Batman Begins' main theme. Clearly, over the last 4 decades, a vocabulary of superhero music has built up, with a lot of scores sharing the same handful of elements organized in different ways. It would be easy and honestly pretty fun to be derisive about this, saying that superhero scores are all generic and boring, and there definitely is a problem with the way the MCU and Hollywood blockbusters in general handles all its soundtracks, as outlined famously by Tony Zhou a couple years ago. But it also gives all superhero movies a common musical identity that can be exploited to connect with an audience, and I love how Spider-Man's soundtrack does just that. The main theme of the game, simply titled Spiderman, gives us a basic portrayal of the main musical idea that the soundtrack is based around, and sets up the melodic motif that you're going to hear many, many times as you play through the game. It doesn't sound just like every other superhero theme, but there are definite common elements being used. The triplet rhythmic feel, the tonic minor pedal, the atmosphere, and most importantly, the solo French horn melody that moves between our tonic G minor and our major 4 chord C major. The way that this melodic figure jumps up first a minor 3rd, like in Batman Begins theme, then walks down to jump up a perfect 4th, a la Superman's theme, along with the corresponding harmonic shift, is just perfect. Spider-Man as a character has always existed somewhere between the gritty, tortured portrayals of Batman and the flawless savior that is Superman, and these successive leaps mirror Spider-Man's story of perpetually getting knocked down and getting back up again. When Spider-Man's in the process of getting knocked down, the music shifts accordingly. The track 8 Years in the Making gives us even more of the musical cliches I mentioned earlier, with the driving triplet rhythm and relentless string arpeggio figures adding tension in a way that feels distinctly superhero. Our main theme motif returns in a way that I really like. It starts out with a very heroic 1 to major 4 chord move, then repeats, with the harmony taking progressively darker turns each time. The way the resolution to B-flat changes to the more typical B-flat minor to the even darker D-flat minor creates the sense of descending into madness, which is perfect for accompanying a harrowing action sequence. Spider-Man has his fair share of heroic moments too, as we see represented musically in the track The Golden Age. As you swing around New York trying to make it to the next mission, the music swells with, well, you could probably name them with me at this point, triplet string arpeggio figures and a driving bass line outlining a 1 to flat 6 to major 4 progression behind our main theme played on a solo French horn. The orchestration here plays a huge part in giving us this grand heroic scale, with the use of full orchestra and choir giving us that epic superhero vibe. The deliberate cross-relation between the C natural and C sharp notes here is emphasized, creating an even more dramatic sense of uplift than we got from the simpler exchange of minor 1 and major 4, giving us what sounds like the full, realized potential of this motif that was so solemnly played for us back in the title theme. As I said, for the most part, what we have here is a combination of elements that we've come to expect from superhero music, but at the end of the day, that's what makes the soundtrack superhero music. You could label the music as cliché and dismiss it, as none of what I've talked about here is really breaking new ground, but you could say the same about the game itself. All of the characters, plot points, mechanics, everything is ripped off from somewhere else, be it established Spider-Man lore or general story writing or video game trope. These parts in isolation maybe do seem a bit cliched, but the game presents them all together in a seamless, polished package and executes these ideas better than any other superhero game has up until this point in time. We finally got the Spider-Man game that everybody and their grandma has been pleading for since the 2004 PS2 classic. No gimmicks, no alternate dimensions, just swinging around, beating up bad guys to music that works perfectly as a soundtrack to a classic Spider-Man adventure. It's so difficult to pull off something that seems this simple, this effectively, and in doing so, Insomniac and John Paisano have created a game that I think will be viewed as a classic for years to come. I want to thank patron Jonathan Garcia, who requested a video on the new Spider-Man game. If you want to join the ranks of the fine Mr. Garcia and the rest of my wonderful patron supporters, feel free to check out my Patreon page here. If you'd like to rack up the number of Twitter accounts you follow without getting any more pesky tweets cluttering up your feed, then give me a follow at 8-Bit Music Theory. Every time I tweet, you get to make a wish. Thanks so much to all of you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.